Resident Evil 9 Requiem. What a game, I tell you. What a game. Could this be the best Resi in the franchise? Maybe. I mean, for certain aspects, I think it is. And then for other things, maybe it's not. But it is that great balance of previous Resident Evil titles. It has the stealth, it has the combat, it has the story, it has the characters. It's got so much going for it. So let's review this game. What are my credentials as a very fresh YouTuber? I've played pretty much all the Resident Evil games, the main titles. The only one I haven't played is number 1. And I've got over 500 platinums. I've platted all those previous Resident Evil games. A lot of experience with games, so I think I've got a good grasp on the general gaming side of things. We'll cut this bit out, I guess. I'll try to avoid like main spoilers throughout this, but it is a review and we're probably going to be covering a lot of the game, so towards the end I'll do more spoiler stuff and try to stay away from that towards the beginning. So yes, Resident Evil 9. I have had the chance to play this twice now. On the third playthrough, I've done a speedrun. First playthrough, just completely blind, just went into it, just enjoyed it, and my god, did I enjoy it. We've got the steelbook there, as you can see from the intro. If I can even line my thumb up. Very nice steelbook. And yes, the game is fantastic. And I'm not even bored yet. On the third playthrough, I am doing an extra playthrough. I'm going for the platinum. There's a lot to say here. I'm going for the platinum, and I'm doing my third playthrough, which is just going to be just to enjoy the game one last time before doing it on the the hardest difficulty. But yes, this game, I'd have to say, is probably in contention for the best Resident Evil game yet, which is high praise because there's a lot of very good Resident Evil games out there. There's a lot of fan favourites. You know, you've got Resi 2, Resi 4. Me personally, my favourite up until this point is Resi 7, and I really like Village as well. I'm a fan of first person, which is one of the things to talk about this game. You've got first person and third person. You can actually choose for both characters, Grace and Leon. The default is first person for Grace and third person for Leon. I do think that's a good choice to stick with. I don't think it makes sense to change them up, unless you just want to see what it looks like as that character. But Grace is the sort of, you know, stealth, horror, slow-paced, you're using less ammo. Makes sense to be first person, very similar to Resident Evil 7 in that respect. And then Leon's side is very similar to, well, the other Leon games, you know, 2, 4, 6. Sadly, we didn't get the 2, 4, 6, 8 with Leon. Rest in peace, Leon. He isn't dead, by the way. But yes, it makes sense to play Leon in third person. He is very combat heavy, and similar to his previous games, it really works to be in third person. It's a lot easier. I do want to try it in first person, probably do that at some point. But yes, there's a lot to talk about this game, so I'll try to be fairly quick on the things I want to talk about. So the first thing is the characters. As I say, you've got Grace and Leon, my boy. And they are very opposite in many cases. You know, you've got the gameplay element of stealth with Grace, combat with Leon, but there's also the fact that Grace is this very unconfident, you know, she's very stuttery, she's unconfident even giving her credentials to the policeman at the start of the game, and throughout the game she's very quiet, scared, and, you know, she's this sort of I don't know, not coward, but, you know, she's just, yeah, she's there. And then Leon is this, you know, he started out as a rookie and he made his way to the villagers in Resi 4, and now he's this confident, not too old, character who is, you know, very confident, very experienced, and he really leans into that. And that, you know, it's kind of cliche to make her like the polar opposite and just like completely stuttery and not weak, but she's an FBI agent. She shouldn't be that bad. And it's kind of a weird thing. So, you know, those are the characters, and they work really well. Then with the characters, as well as the antagonists, you've got the acting in the game. The acting is superb. I mean, it is in most Resident Evil games, but especially for the antagonists as well. For probably the main antagonist, Victor, his voice acting is very, very well done.
Or we can begin your treatment.
Grace! Grace!
As well as both Grace and Leon, both very well acted. Now, with those characters, you've got the motivation. Why are they there? And does it make sense? Does it drive the story forward? One of the problems I've had with previous Resident Evil games is you've sort of just been plumped in, you don't really know what's going on, you don't have a purpose, and you're just sort of meant to go where the game tells you to. I don't like that in a game as much. That's why I like Resident Evil 7. It's clear from the start you are there to get your wife, And even though she told you not to come, you are going, and that's your motivation. It's a strong motivation, quite cliche, quite weak in that respect, but the emotion's there, and you can really emphasize with it and get into this story. With this game, it's fairly good. With Grace's side, it's her job. She's there. You know why she's there. She's investigating, and then once you've been taken at the start, you're basically just trying to escape and save this little girl. So nice little side quest there to save the girl. Anyway, and then for Leon's side, pretty clear from the trailers. It's not really a spoiler. He is infected, and basically he's there to try find a cure, I guess, and also just make amends for what's happened in previous Resident Evil titles. The value proposition for the game, it is a AAA game, and it's priced as such. It's not priced as a first-party game, so you can get it, for the £60, $60 mark, but it's very short, as Resident Evil games usually are. Now, I don't like to usually think of games as they have to be 20 hours, 30 hours long to be worth the price tag of a AAA game. I don't think that's how you should view things. Sure, it's nice if you can get a long game, but there's plenty of long games out there that are just full of fluff, and this one is very focused. And my personal playthrough on the first time through was 10 hours. Probably going to get a bunch more future playthroughs, but even if you just played it once for 10 hours, I think it's worth the amount you're paying for it. It's a very good experience, very good story, very good combat, good mechanics. It's generally very much worth the value, in my opinion. Now, the pacing of the game, I think this is probably one of the weaker things about the game. They do get it right in certain parts of the game, but especially towards the very start and in the middle, I think the pacing's a little bit off. You sort of basically start as Grace for about a 20-minute section, then you switch to Leon for maybe a 10-minute section, another 20 minutes, very short again, and then you go back to Grace for a massive classic Resident Evil, big map with puzzles and repeating corridors, that type of thing, and you're with Grace for a good few hours before you get back to Leon. Now, this happens again later on, where you play as Leon for a very long time, and it's clear they didn't want to split it into like half an hour, splitting it between them, which makes sense, but I think it could have been a bit more an hour, instead of, 20 minutes, and then 3 hours as Grace, maybe a bit of Leon, bit of Grace, 3 hours as Leon. I thought it was paced a little bit weirdly in that respect. It's not a huge gripe, but the one thing I will say about the way the two characters work is I would, as getting towards the end of a section for Grace, I would be itching for the combat. And as I was getting towards the edge of the combat for Leon, I was itching for that, slower stealth, more, horror aspect of things. I think it worked really well. You were looking forward to the next time, as well as still enjoying what you were doing. You might be getting a little bit fed up, but I think that, split of two very different types of Resident Evil games plumped into one, I think really worked for Resident Evil 9 here. And I'm kind of surprised they haven't really done it before, but as I say, it's sort of like Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 4 meet each other and merge and just make one super game that just works really well. The combat. Now, you get combat with both characters, of course, but with it being that sort of Resi 7, Resi 4 thing, Leon's definitely a lot more leaning into the combat. You get a lot more ammo, you get more weapons, you have a credit system, you get points for killing enemies. There's no more of the sort of hunting for, jewels to sell or selling boss carcasses, anything like that. You're just literally... You might get a little bit more money for a boss, but every enemy you kill as Leon, you'll get money for. You can upgrade your weapons, buy health, buy ammo. And it works really well. I think it's a good balance. And then as Grace, you still have combat, but generally you just have a pistol. You can use knives, which, have durability, which is a nice mechanic previously used as well with Leon, in Resi 4. And yeah, it's a lot more slower paced. You're meant to, try find different ways around it. You can generally get enough ammo as Grace, but, they do try to suggest maybe you could sneak around these enemies, use a bottle to distract them, stealth kill them with a crafting mechanic, that sort of thing. And I think the combat works really well on both fronts. And as I say, you are itching for the other side after you've played for one or the other. The enemy design is really good in this game, as well as just the general acting of the enemies. You know, the general zombies, they are very believable, especially not just the actual animation, but the voice acting. They will sort of mumble human effects. They do have their sort of personalities from before they got infected, and you can see that coming through. And each zombie does, for the most part, some of them, you know, can be very similar, but they do sort of feel like they were a different person to another zombie was, and I think that's a really strong point, because there's not really zombie games out there that do that. They're all generally just a zombie, whereas a lot of these do feel unique and like a different person, which is something I've never really seen in a zombie game. Then you got your classic resource management. As Grace, especially when you're first starting out, you will feel that smaller inventory size, and you can upgrade it. You have the choice, you know, do you want to go for increased health? Do you want to go increased backpack size? And I think it's a good way to give the player choice, make their own choice on how they want to play. Do they want to be stronger, or do they want to be able to carry more things, you know? But make it a bit easier for yourself in that regard, but harder because you don't have as much health. I think it's a good choice. And yeah, you definitely feel it as Grace. It does feel like that classic Resident Evil. You have to really be strict about inventory management. As Leon, not so much. I played on normal on the first playthrough, and I never struggled for space, and I never struggled for ammo, really, as long as you're switching around weapons, you know, make sure you use your pistol, your machine pistol, and your shotgun, you know, all the different weapons. You won't really run out of ammo unless you're really struggling. You can still craft it, you can buy it. So I think it was a little bit weaker on Leon's side. I don't think it was meant to be difficult. I think the whole point was meant to be Leon is, you know, combat focused. He is meant to have loads of ammo. He's meant to have loads of inventory space. And then you're meant to feel that sort of claustrophobia when you're playing as Grace. You know, you don't have the space, you don't have the ammo. It's meant to be that sort of comparison. But I think it just failed a little bit for Leon. But I can see why they did that. They had a new mechanic, as they usually do with Resident Evil games, in the case of Grace. You had this sort of blood collector looking ass machine ass thing that you could basically just collect blood off the floor, off dead enemies, you know, anything like that. You could pick up blood, and then you'd use that for your crafting instead of the usual, you know, sort of scrap that you would actually get with Leon. You'd use your blood and, you know, metal pieces to make ammo, to make cocktails. Not cocktails, Molotov cocktails. We're not drinking on the job. And then you could, craft healing items, as well as even crafting your steroids and stabilizers. You get empty jars that you could basically just fill if you had the blood. One of the other downfalls of the game, in my opinion, was the stealth. Stealth is difficult in video games, and some do it a lot better than others. I think in this case, it wasn't too great. It definitely felt like when you were meant to be using stealth, you sort of just have to wait for 2 minutes until the enemies walked around and gone another way. I don't think that's a good way to do stealth. It is more believable, and I guess more immersive. That is how stealth would probably work in real life. But because it's a video game, you don't really want to be sat there for 2 minutes doing nothing. It's kind of boring, and it happened in a lot of sections of the game, which is one of the things I really felt in this second and now into third playthrough. I'm getting a little bit bored of it. I'd have rather it been done a bit better, but you know, it's only mainly Grace's side that has this, and you can see why they do it. You know, they've got the classic sort of labyrinth route of the maps where, you know, you can loop around things, you can take different corridors around, and, you know, but there's certain places where you don't really have a choice. You just kind of have to wait with the, you know, the big lady, and then there's a little section later on where you're in basically a flashback at the orphanage from Resident Evil 2, and there's a lot of sections where you just gotta wait. Just gotta wait until the people go by. Just gotta sit there and wait. Just chill, make a coffee, put kettle on, maybe put a film on for a bit. Just do whatever you want. The puzzles were fairly good. I wouldn't say there's anything to write home about with the puzzles. They were very similar to previous Resident Evil ones. One of them was literally just, you know, you found a piece of paper and it had the solution on it. One of them you sort of had to shade in and it released the names. That was literally just, you found the booklet, you found a pencil, you shaded it. It wasn't really a puzzle. The one that was the best, I guess, was you had like 3 pictures in the room. One of them was with the cabinet closed, so that's like a, you know, false, you're not supposed to use that code. And then there were 2 other pictures where you could see the first half, the second half. That was a bit more of a, you know, clever puzzle, but in terms of puzzles from Resident Evil games, I'd say they were quite weak, in my opinion, and there wasn't really too much in the ways of that. The best puzzles in the game, I would say, is probably when you're in the basement and you have these batteries, I think they were called. Well, I mean, that's what they did. They were batteries. They powered stuff. And you had to basically collect 3, but some sections would require 2, or you'd have to put it in a certain place. I think that sort of puzzle worked a lot better. You had to figure out what order to put the batteries in, what areas to go through. You went to one area, you put a battery in, but you couldn't actually grab the item you needed because the power was making electricity on the floor. So you had to take your battery out, go back around another way. I think that worked a lot better for the puzzles. The horror aspect was very strong on Grace's side. Of course, with Leon's, it's not meant to be as scary, apart from the fact that you have a shit ton of enemies there, which can be very scary. In terms of, pure horror, Grace was very strong. I still think Resident Evil 7 tops it in terms of horror, but I know a lot of people have been trying to refund the game, but not succeeding on Steam because the game was too scary. A lot of people said that about Resident Evil 8 as well, that it was too scary. Maybe they did about 7, I'm not sure. Me personally, I think 7 still holds that top spot for horror. I would then probably go Resident Evil 9 for Grace's sections, and then maybe 8 for the horror. So yeah, it's second best in my opinion in the series for the horror. I haven't played the first one. I believe that probably is quite scary because of the fixed camera angles. It gives you that claustrophobia, gives you that less control, which probably does make the game scarier. But yeah, pretty strong, just not the best. But you can play the game and you might find it scarier than Resi 7 ever was, so who knows? In terms of immersion, I thought it was really good, especially because of what we talked about with the first person, third person. As Grace, the first person really brings you into the environment. You can definitely tell if you switch to the third person. I'd say it's a lot less scary. Apart from the fact that they actually added stumbling for Grace when you're running away from the big lady, which kind of was terrifying, the fact that you thought maybe you'd fall on the ground and get grabbed. But in first person, you're in the game, you are the person, and it makes the horror a lot more intensified. And then when you're doing the combat sections in third person, it's a lot easier to feel like you're playing a bit more of an arcade, and I think that really works for the immersion. You can, of course, use whatever camera you want, and you are given that option and the control as the player, which is always a good thing. But yeah, overall, the immersion was really good. The lighting was absolutely phenomenal in this, both in terms of horror and in terms of graphics. It is incredibly well used, especially the first sections in the game where you don't really have any weapons. You're just sort of powerless. You're just sort of there. Like, they used a very good lighting. As a main mechanic, there was areas where the lights weren't working or they were flickering. A long corridor you'd put the light on and there was this statue at the end that really looked like it was an enemy at first. It was really good use of lighting, honestly, in this game. The environment's really good. There was a lot of variation. You've got the sort of initial area in the hospital. You've got, I don't want to spoil too much, but you go to Raccoon City. There's sort of a lab underground. There's the orphanage. There's the basement in the hospital. A lot of varied environments, all very, very well designed, both graphically and just level design. Classic Resident Evil stuff. You expect this sort of thing. A lot of the doors are locked. Doors locked. And you have to go around the other side, unbolt it or whatever, and then you get a shortcut for later on. Classic Resident Evil stuff. I don't think it's any better than it was previously. I don't think it was really any worse than it was previously. It was just there. Now, the sound design was amazing in this game. There were even times when I played with headphones on and I thought my partner at the other side of the room was making the noises, but it was coming from the game. That's how good the sound design was. It was really immersive. The score, the music's really good, especially the combat music. It had that sort of Doom feel where you could really feel like you were this badass in the combat sections, and it would naturally come in and naturally go out at the end. It wasn't, start, stop or anything. And the enemy audio design was really good as well. You had unique enemies that would make unique noises. That is my fiance on the other side of the room, her favourite enemy in the game, the singing ladies. There were 2 of these in the hospital, and you could really hear them from far away, and the further away you got, you could really... It was really well done. Like, it was really realistic. If you were on the bottom floor with a balcony, you could really tell the reverb coming down. If you were past a few doors, you could very faintly hear it. I can't think of many games that have a better audio design than this game. It was very realistic, very well done in terms of position as well. especially with headphones. When it's coming out of speakers, sometimes it could be struggle to tell if the enemy was, you know, above, below, but I mean, that's just standard if you're using just speakers, but if you have headphones on, it becomes a lot easier, of course. So yeah, overall, absolutely phenomenal game. There's only a few places you can fault it. In terms of the story, I think it's pretty well done from the start to the end. There's nice twists and turns. There's some sort of, you know, I don't want to stay away from spoilers, but there's a lot of callbacks to previous Resident Evil games, enemies from previous Resident Evil games, that sort of thing, and it works really well. You are actually given a choice at the end. I'm not going to spoil what the choices do, but there is one that is definitely considered canon, I think. As I say, I'm not going to spoil what happens with that, but the story overall, I think, is really good. I think it's something Resident Evil struggles with, and I think 7 did it really well. From start to end, really, really good. 8 was a little bit not as good, and then, I mean, I know 4 is a lot of people's favourite, and it's a fan favourite. I personally don't think the story in it is very good at all. 2 is a lot better, especially, you know, your sort of A side, B side, getting to see the different sides of things. Claire having her own journey, Leon having his own journey. I think that's really good. 3 was absolutely dog shit. And, you know, the 5 and 6 were just co-op games, the story. I mean, the stories weren't too bad. I need to revisit those, to be fair. So overall, I'd personally put it as second best story behind 7. I might be a bit biased. You know, 7 is my favourite, as I said from the start. Overall, the score for the game, I would give as an 8. I think it is up there. What would I give 7 if I had reviewed it? I don't know, I think it might get an 8 as well. It has its own flaws. You know, there's not really many enemy variation types. It is more of a story-focused, horror-focused game than a combat-focused one. But this isn't a video about Resi 7 anyway. But just wanted to give a bit of context around the score. I think a lot of people are reviewing it at very high, you know, Metacritic scores, and IGN, I think they're getting like 9s out of 10s, 9.5s out of 10s. I think that's a bit too high. I think the story does let it down a little bit. I think there are certain parts of it as well, they're a bit weaker, but I can see why they'd give it that high. Me personally, I think, you know, you could stretch to an 8.5 maybe, but I don't like to work in 0.5s because that's the coward's way of scoring things. We give it an 8 and it's well deserved. What do you think? Have you played it? Is this your first time hearing about it? If it is, please do try it. It is very much worth it, even if it is £60. You know, don't wait for a sale. Just go out, play it. It's a very good game. Especially if you're a fan of the franchise, I think it's definitely worth picking up. And yeah, it is that sort of culmination of the previous Resident Evil games. Definitely worth trying out. Thank you so much for watching the review. If you made it all the way to the end, that is insane stuff. Thank you so much for doing that. And please do let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think it was a good review? Do you think it was believable stuff, things? Yeah, anyway, enjoy the game. Play it, please. And also subscribe as well, please. Thank you. Bye.